So what happened was I got to watching the throwback episode and I saw myself at the desk and I was like, I need the desk back. I'm talking to Ryan, he's right behind the camera here now. I was like, what do we have to do to get the desk back on the show? So I'm super stoked to be here. I think I just miss my mugs, mostly. But thank you so much for joining us on this week's Finish Friday, and let's get into today's topic. Artists don't fit in. And I want to remind you of this week with a very specific story. See, back in the day in high school, I used to play a lot of golf, and we would pile a bunch of kids in the bus and we would drive an hour and a half to wherever we needed to go to get to the tournament. And I remember one moment where I was sitting in the back with a bunch of my peers and everybody was hanging out, talking and laughing. And all of a sudden I reached this stark point of time where I realized I don't fit in with these people. And it wasn't just my golf friends, it was everybody. Like, I didn't feel like I fit in with anybody. And I want to remind you and encourage you today, that's a good thing. See, a lot of times in life, we feel like we have to fit in, we have to conform with whatever's going on around us. But when you're an artist, you need that marginalization. You need to be a little bit isolated to do what you need to do. Listen, Sigmund Freud was completely shut off from his peers whenever he first proposed the idea of a subconscious mind. And now that idea is commonplace. Albert Einstein's family had no idea what he was talking about when he was speaking of relativity, but now that stuff is commonplace and everybody knows his name. T.S. Eliot was growing up in a cushy family, went to Harvard, had the life everyone would have dreamed of, but he moved across the ocean to pursue a career in poetry. Listen, right now, I need you to dive in to the discomfort. I need you to dig in to the isolation, to the marginalization that you feel in your everyday life, because if you felt like you fit in, you probably wouldn't be an artist. And so this week, instead of feeling that guilt and that shame that you feel from not being part of the crew, dive into who you really are. Go into the dark, find that isolation, and come out with the art that we know you were meant to create. Let me go into my new mailbox here for this week's question of the week. Brett asks, I often find myself drawn to the Myers-Briggs analysis to determine the best course of action whenever I'm leading. Do you find any value of this, or is it an over-analysis? Brett, that's a good question, and I want to tell you about a friend of mine that I'm working with right now, whose name is Haas Kuba, and he lives in London. We're working on a book called The Unfair Advantage. And Haas is an economic major, so dude is pretty brilliant. But one day we're having a conversation about the book, and he comes to me and he says, every model that we've ever come up with to try and define human nature is wrong. It's all about finding the best one. And so that's the approach I take when it comes to things like this. Like, I think it's a nice starting point, but I don't think that it's the end all be all. And it's simply because, you know, maybe it's like a little bit of that rebel nature, a little bit of that artist thing, but I don't like letting tests define me. What I do think things like this are great for is kind of a guideline. Right? So if you've got your Myers-Briggs, you've got your DISC assessment, you've got your strength finder, or whatever it is that you're taking to try and help you define yourself, I would always take that with a grain of salt and see it as a guideline, but not a set in stone rule. Because what happens at some point is people take these things too seriously and they start acting into who they think they should be as opposed to who they actually are. And think of like season 9 of Friends, where Joey's making ridiculous jokes just because that's what Joey does, as compared to Joey in the earlier seasons of Friends, where he's like an original character with thoughts and ideas and stuff. So whenever you take these tests, I would take them as just a part of the whole and know that it's ultimately you who gets to decide who you are. This week's Artist Spotlight goes on someone I mentioned earlier at this show, and that is T.S. Eliot. Now, you guys know I've been studying up on kind of the old masters of creativity to see what we can learn and pull to this show. And here's what I found out. In the late 1800s, T.S. Eliot is pretty much set up to live whatever kind of life he wants. He's got a comfortable family. They've got some money. He gets into Harvard, which anytime you get into Harvard, you know that's a good thing. And then he gets into school and he realizes, I hate this. And he's uncomfortable and he doesn't like his classmates, he doesn't like the classes, and he decides instead to leave America and head over to London to try and pursue a career in poetry. And while he's there, he just happens to meet some of the other Americans who had defected and kind of fill this gap. Whenever London goes into war for World War I, they're able to do a lot of the things in that nation that they probably wouldn't have gotten to do otherwise. But T.S. Eliot says that it's no chance, he writes the love song of Alfred Prufrock, Portrait of a Lady, or The Wasteland, if he doesn't step out of that comfort zone and find that marginality and find that isolation. So I have to give mad love to my man for teaching us all that it's okay to leave the comfort zone, and then it's all right to be by yourself and create your own art in the vision that you see it, and not the vision that everyone else sees for you. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Finish Friday. Before you leave, make sure to answer this week's Ask the Audience, and that is, do you prefer coffee or tea? Thinking about it now that I got my mug back. Let me know. I'm gonna do a poll down there and make sure to let me know which one you like. Again, this is Todd B from Tennessee. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk with you next week.